In this video, we're going to be going over Chapter 3, looking at attitudes, self-concept, values, and ethics. Now, what we're going to be doing is looking at some of these key things here. That's, again, it's all related to the intrapersonal skills as far as human relations are concerned. Now, attitudes. You can have good attitudes, you can have bad attitudes. It's basically a strong belief or feeling that we might have about something. Our attitudes actually come from our values. And what they do is they actually will impact what our behaviors are. All right. Our attitudes are actually coming from all the things that we've done in our lives, the learning that we've had from our parents and our friends, things like that. The thing is, our attitude is very important as far as what it is that we're doing on the job and in our interpersonal relations. Now, one of the instruments that you have there is looking at management attitudes. Go ahead and go do that at some point in time. And again, you don't have to submit these things. It just gives you an idea as far as where it is that you're at. Now, there's theory X and theory Y. Theory X tends to be much more get the job done, just get her done. People don't like to work. You have to stand over them, that sort of thing. Theory Y is much more work is as much a thing as play, okay? You don't have to closely supervise folks. They know what it is that they need to do. Just let them go do it. Depending on your score, you may have a management attitude that's more theory X or theory Y or something that's in the middle. Another thing to think about is what's called the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect is what's called the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you've ever had anybody that really believed in you, all of a sudden you were able to accomplish what it was that they were asking you to do. If you had someone who did not believe in you, thought you were stupid or something like that, you had a tendency to not accomplish it. The Pygmalion effect is so important, it's unreal. And many times we don't even realize where the biases and the attitude that we have about a person is coming from. I have added a YouTube video to the section that's called the Pygmalion effect. Go back and watch that. Watch that video on the Pygmalion effect. It gives you the information as far as what Robert Rosenthal actually came up with and how he tested that. And it's absolutely incredible how powerful it is. Another thing to think about is what your job attitude is like. You have a self-assessment, go through that and think about what your attitude is really about as far as your job. It may be positive or it may be negative. Some of the things to think about as far as improving how we feel about our job is to remember positive attitude is key to success. Negativity is very, very harmful as far as the relationships that we have and how we see our job. And we have to keep an open mind about some of the things. And another thing to think about is is there something that's good about what it is that you're doing? Is there something that you do enjoy in your job that will actually help you with your attitude? Now, we control what our attitudes are. We choose what our attitudes are. Nobody does that to us. Now, it can be difficult to change. That's up to you. The thing is, it's the way you see the world and the way you see your job. You cannot change someone else's attitude. Now, it says here it can be done. No, I sincerely believe we choose what it is that we're doing. We cannot change somebody else. They have to change it. All we can do is provide an environment so that they can improve theirs. So, for example, giving feedback, helping them see the positive, what it was that they're doing, making sure they're clear as far as what the consequences, both pro and con, are. And number one, being a positive role model for other people. It's amazing how important that can be as far as helping others with their attitudes about things. Now, job satisfaction. We determine whether we're satisfied with our job or not. And what we want is we want a job that we enjoy doing, something that does provide us satisfaction, something that where we are making a difference. And it's not just grudge work or anything like that. The things that make people satisfied with their jobs, first of all, number one is doing cool work, doing something that makes a difference, that is interesting, that may be important. That makes a real difference as far as people's satisfaction. Pay and benefits doesn't necessarily improve how we feel about the job. Now, maybe how we feel about the organization or how we feel about ourselves. It doesn't necessarily impact what it is that we're doing in the job. Having the opportunity to grow, maybe get promotions, does impact our satisfaction with the job. Also, the personal relationships that we have with our boss and our coworkers can impact how satisfied we are with our job. So a lot of things come into play as far as our job satisfaction is concerned. Now, the highest satisfaction is actually coming from those who are in professional and managerial positions. Those who have a tendency to be in manual labor jobs are not necessarily satisfied with the job. Now, that there are exceptions. For example, you have somebody who is a fantastic carpenter. The person absolutely loves being able to finish something, step back, and be able to admire what it was that he just did. There could be a lot of job satisfaction in that. Now, another thing to think about is our self-concept. How we see ourselves. Do we like ourselves? Do we find ourselves valued? Are we happy with what it is that we're doing as far as our life is concerned? All of these come into play as far as how we see ourselves. We look in the mirror. Do we like what it is that we see being reflected back at us? There's a concept called self-efficacy. In other words, do we believe that we can accomplish something? Are we confident in ourselves? And a lot of that self-fulfilling prophecy comes into play. Another thing to think about is what's called attribution. In other words, we attribute behavior to something. This goes back, for a personal standpoint, goes back to locus of control. In other words, if something happens and we're attributing that to something outside of ourselves, that's that external locus. If something happens and we're attributing the impact to our choices, that's that internal locus of control. We also look at this from what somebody else does. In other words, if we have a high trusting relationship with someone and they do something that might disappoint us, we have a tendency to attribute their actions to something outside of themselves. If we have a low trusting relationship with someone and they do something that disappoints us, we will have a tendency to think they did that because they don't like us or they're against us or something like that. So that attribution aspect can really come into play from a self standpoint and also from working with others. When you start talking from a management standpoint, if we have a trusting relationship with the people that report to us, there's going to be one attribution. If we have a low trust relationship with the people that report to us, there's going to be another one. So when we start talking about building that positive self-concept, we need to be thinking about what are we doing as far as learning from our mistakes. Instead of trying to blow them off, how can we learn from them? Accept and bounce back from some of the failures. We're always going to have some sort of failure, folks. Don't dwell on it. Go forward. Controlling the negative emotions and thinking. We're always talking to ourselves. There's always a lot of self-talk that's going on. What is your self-talk saying? Is it saying that I am important? I can do these things. Or is it saying I can't do it? I'm just no good, or something along those lines. Really listen to that self-talk. Now, be thinking about what your personal values are. You have the exercise there where you can step back and start thinking about what are some of the key things that are important to you. Values are the things that are very important to us, the things that we hold dear. In other words, some people will say, I really value family, all right? Or they might say, I really value money or something along those lines. We have all kinds of things that we value. One of the things to think about is, what are those things? Which ones are actually stronger? And are we really focusing in and doing what it is that we say we're going to do? So, for example, I know many people who sit there and say, family is very important to me. I really value family, but they're never at home. I know there are organizations who sit there and say, our most important asset walks out the door every night, and then they treat people like garbage. So one of the things to think about is, what are those values? What are the true values? And what is it that we can do to live by those values? that we really do hold dear. Spirituality in the workplace. Now, spirituality does not necessarily mean religion. Spirituality is where we get our energy, our sense of self, and things like this. And so we do bring spirituality to the workplace. One of the things to think about is, how are we doing that? Some of the guides to having a spiritual perspective. Know yourself. That's some of the things that we're doing in this class, is trying to get an idea as far as who we are, acting with authenticity. Nobody likes a phony, all right? And so being real, being honest with other folks, respecting and honoring the beliefs of others. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to agree with them on everything. It just means that you respect where it is that they're coming from. Be as trusting as you can. In other words, trusting others is very, very important. The best leaders extend trust first before they extend trust back. And then maintaining a spiritual practice as far as what it is that we do with our lives. Now, ethics. Ethics is basically where you are deciding and acting upon what's right and wrong. You do have a self-assessment. Go ahead and do that to determine what standard are you actually operating at. Do you have higher ethics or do you have lower ethics? So the whole idea behind that instrument is to just give you an idea as far as where you stand on on your ethical conduct. Now, what's interesting is, majority of people will stretch those limits of the ethical behavior at times. It's kind of like, well, it's just one pen that I'm taking out of the office supplies or something along those lines. We know what's right and what's wrong, unless you're absolutely sick. We know right from wrong. And so do we act according to what's right, or do we kind of stretch that a little bit? What goes along with ethics is what's called moral development. A guy by the name of Lawrence Kohlberg came up with his 3 levels of moral development. You have your pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional levels of moral development. Pre-conventional is more like that childlike understanding as far as what's going on. In other words, you're not going to do something because you want to avoid any kind of punishment. You're constantly thinking, what's in it for me? And so that pre-conventional is more along the lines of what kids tend to do. Now, adults do the same thing. The thing is, we need to move beyond that. Most adults are at the conventional level. In other words, what is it that society wants? What is it that the majority is doing? I will follow the norms that everybody else is doing. I'll be the good boy or good girl or something along those lines. I'm not going to speed because that's against the law. That's the conventional level of morality. Then you have the post-conventional level. Not that many people actually achieve that. And that's where you have that principled conscience. In other words, you do something based on your own values, based on your own principles, because you feel that's the right thing to do. You may be going against some of the social conventions. The thing is, you still go ahead and do that because you still feel that's the right thing to do. Now, all of the situations are relevant whenever you are acting or ethically or not ethically. One of the things that really sticks out and it will help you understand where you stand is what's called Heinz dilemma. Heinz dilemma is basically a situation where you are determining whether you're going to steal something or do something that's right or something along those lines. You see the information that's there. It's also in the book. I have also added a video from YouTube that gives you a demonstration of it and will tell you whether you are conventional, pre-conventional, or post-conventional based on the selections that you have. Now, the video is supposed to be interactive. It's not. So you may need to fast forward the video to various points. The thing is, watch that video. That gives you kind of an idea as far as, based on the selection that you choose, what level of moral development are you at. Many times we will justify unethical behavior based on various things. You have the moral justification. In other words, doing something because you feel that's the right thing. Displacement of responsibility. In other words, my boss told me to do it. My boss ordered me to do it. Diffusion of responsibility. In other words, well, everybody else is doing it. Why not? Advantageous comparison. In other words, well, what she did is worse than me, sort of thing. Disregarding or distorting the consequences. It's not all that bad. So what? Attribution of blame, and then euphemistic labeling, also called politically correct types of things. Okay, so for example, folks, I'm not bald, but I am follically challenged. So the guide to being ethical. First of all, think about the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And actually, the best one is what's called the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would have it done unto them. Think about the stakeholders. In other words, all the people who are involved. Is there a win-win for them? Think about the four-way test. All right, is what I'm doing here the truth? Is it fair? Does it build good relationships? And will it benefit all? Discernment, advice, and application of ethical guides. So these are some things to think about as far as those guides to being ethical. Those are some key points from the chapter. Go ahead and make sure that you go through the various instruments there to learn a little bit more about yourself, and also watch the other two videos. Let me know if you have questions.